Good evening, Conversations, and this is a show produced by the Congressman Davis's office, and we thank he and Nikki for putting it together. And I'm going to go around and let everybody on the panel introduce themselves. I'll get started with you. Excuse me. I'll start with you. I'm the proud father with all the children that had some issues in the background a little early.
Yeah, you better know it. And I am a proud father, and probably the best title I have. Hopefully, a proud husband as well. Family doctor, obesity doctor. Love spending some time with you guys. Still getting my voice back. I had a recent upper respiratory, so I got my warm tea. It's not a toddy. You know how we grew up. We grew up with a little extra something in it. But and if she did put something in it, you'll see that in my personality as we proceed. But happy to be here. Thank you for Congressman and Nikki for the opportunity.
Okay, Doug.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the western suburbs for 30 years, and after that, spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. in the congressman's office. And boy, was that an amazing experience. I'm here to answer your questions as best I can, and it's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues.
Thank you, Doug. Maya, Dr. Maya.
Good evening to this wonderful panel. Good evening. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for creating this space. Thank you, community, for consistently sharing your questions, helping us keep the pulse on what's going on, giving us an opportunity to learn from you as we learn together. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, I am too. Is Mr. Harrington here? I didn't see him. All right. Well, we'll just go ahead. My name is Dr. Terry Mason. I'm a retired urologist, very retired,
Mhm.
and very happily retired. And I say that because a lot of times, people are sad about things, but I'm not. I'm glad to be in this stage of my life, and I'm even happy to be here with my colleagues tonight as we begin this dialogue. So, who'd like to kick us off this afternoon? Oh,
Looks
Joe,
like
you're back.
Harrington. Yeah, Joe.
Joe just popped in. Joe, you want to go right ahead?
Oh, uh, I guess you're asking for introductions. I'm Joe
Yes.
Harrington, same as I was last week. I'm retired public healthcare professional. Spent most of my career working in hospitals and public health. Retired in 2017. I was the administrative regional health officer for Cook County and administrative law judge for the Illinois Department of Public Health. Glad to be here.
All right. And we always see our esteemed congressman who is responsible for making sure this happens. And we want to thank him. I'm sure we'll hear from him during the course of the evening. Um, and if you wanted to make some remarks right now, Congressman Davis, that'd be totally fine.
The only thing I really need to say is thanks again to all of you for being on. We are very pleased that the government averted a shutdown last week, which could have had serious consequences for healthcare, especially in funding for the National Institute of Health and other entities. People ultimately could have had their Medicare, Medicaid affected. Um, Fortunately, we got a reprieve and have 45 days now to negotiate and see if we can't agree upon a full budget for the whole year that would last until the end of September next year, 2024. Of course, we just had dropped on us a few minutes ago the concreteness of an effort of some members of the House of Representatives to have a vote on whether or not the Speaker remains the Speaker. And of course, the leadership question affects everything that goes on around here and any place else where there is a need for leadership. So we keep our fingers crossed that we'll get through this period without too much disruption and our country can move ahead and continue to be the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And some of that is seriously in question as to whether or not we're going to retain that status. A nation need to be healthy just as individuals need to be healthy. So again, thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for providing the tremendous information, keeping us up and keeping us interested. I just attended my specialist today, and he said I could walk without my stick. So we'll see what happens. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You be careful, Congressman.
All right.
You know, we don't need any slip ups, no pun intended. Well, we want to say good evening to Virginia Knight, who's tuned in for us, and Renee, and looks like Crystal Bennett. And we'll be getting to your comments as we go through the rest of the evening. And we want you to join in and let us know what you're thinking about, what questions you have. And we also say hello to Nellie Parnell, as well as Crystal, and we got a few other folks. So let's go ahead and get this started. I know that COVID vaccinations are gearing up again. And I want to ask anyone from our panel, just for the benefit of the people who are listening, what's that status and what are the recommendations? And I'll start with you, Dr. Maya, for people in terms of the COVID boosters. Dr. Maya? Dr. Maya, are you muted?
Yeah, she's working on it. She hears, but she.
All right, anyone, Doug, you want to take a stab at that? You or Tony?
So
Waiting on Dr. Maya.
I think what my understanding of the COVID recommendations are that if you're over 65, if you're immunocompromised, that this would be a good time to get the vaccination. The actual incidence of COVID now in Chicago has dropped some, so there's less around. So your chances of benefiting from the vaccine are pretty good in this particular point in time. You can get it at the same time as the flu vaccine. And some people are recommending that if you do get the flu vaccine and a COVID vaccine, you could wait 2 weeks before you get the RSV vaccine, who's also recommended for the older population, but not necessarily the younger population.
I'll just say I had a call from the house physician last week, just doing what they call a regular checkup, calling to recommend that I come down and see them, that I come down and get my booster shot and get a flu shot. And it's just a regular check-in and check up, which is as much a part. And that's one of the things I appreciate about the house physician around here. But I also appreciate it because I got the same kind of call from my health plan, simply saying it's time to check in, go and get checked out, make sure you get your flu shot, and make sure that you get your booster. And so I'm going to do that. And that too is becoming and has become a pretty regular part of healthcare delivery in our city and in many places in our country. And I think that's a tremendous improvement. I have not always gotten a call like that. Maybe other people have been getting them for 25 or 30 years, but I have not. So I consider that to be a real improvement in terms of healthcare delivery.
Well, we want to make sure that you stay healthy, Congressman, and we've got to make sure that all of the recommendations that are put out by the CDC, people are aware of them so they can heed to what those recommendations are. I too have had all of them, including my shingle shot. So that was interesting because I had not had that, but I'd had chickenpox. So, if you had chickenpox, you've already got the virus that will help, that causes shingles. So and it's very painful. I've seen people who've had it. I don't know, Tony, if you or Maya have had to treat someone who's had shingles, but from what I can understand, it's extremely painful.
Yeah.
Dr. Mason, I just want to jump in. The shot is not as painful as the shingles. I think we need to make that clear. There's a pinprick, but you don't want the shingles. And if you can sustain that small pinprick, which none of us like shots, you can reduce the risk that you'll get shingles, because you definitely don't want. I've never had it, but I know people have had it, and people told me that they said they felt like they were going to die. So
Well, I've
please.
had people tell me that was very, very painful, and maybe the clinicians can chime in here, but so much so that people were taking pain medication for the pain that the shingles was causing. So I'll let the clinicians on the other clinician sort of check in on that statement and weigh in on how that gets managed if it gets a little out of control.
Yeah, it's definitely to be avoided. One of the biggest regrets that my patients share with me is when they had an opportunity to get a vaccine, which, as Joseph Harrington has suggested, won't be as painful as the actual illness itself. You have to trust me. They regret it. I don't have the actual stats, but I know a large percentage of people who end up with shingles, this painful, itchy, blistering rash that can make you feel like you have the flu. You have the painful rash, and some people have a not so painful rash, but it's definitely going to be, it's going to irritate you. It may cause numbness because it does affect the nerves in your skin. That rash that maybe started as chickenpox will kind of reintroduce itself from the nerve up to your skin, and you can get a fever, you can get headache and things like that. So, but that rash is called herpetic neuralgia. And when you experience this painful rash, you can experience it for a couple of weeks. You can experience it for a couple of months. And I've actually seen people experience it for a couple of years. So it's very disconcerting and disabling when you get it that way. And what flares up? Shingles. Imagine you get chicken pox when you're younger, and then as you get older, which is why you tend to see it in people who are older, but you can also see it in a younger person who's under a lot of stress. When your immune system is under attack because you're under a lot of stress, then your body won't be able to contain that virus that you got many years ago. So if you get an illness, if you're being treated with chemo because you have cancer or you're under stress, it can flare it up. And we have many ways to deal with it. You have antivirals. Some people even take steroids. Some people put topicals on it, like a lidocaine, cream that'll help with the pain. But what you don't want to do is, again, have an opportunity to be vaccinated and miss that. Because the treatments with the steroids and the ibuprofens and the things of that nature, and when it's really bad, opioids, and just an FYI about opioids, which I just learned recently, there's a issue with the opioids because every year they have to, and I'm thinking hydrocodone, oxycodone, every year the people who manufacture it have to guesstimate how much they need. And if they don't get that guesstimate right, they may then be told by Uncle Sam that we're not going to let you make any more. So we may find moving forward over the next year or so, because the estimate wasn't right. They underestimated the need. We may find shortages on those strong pain medicines that we use for things like herpetic neuralgia, which is the shingles complication, and other pain conditions. So just a FYI. At the end of the day, there are other complications that can occur with this shingles diagnosis. You don't want to get it around the eyes because it can actually cause serious issues with your eyes. Obviously, you have the rash that can get infected. And I've even seen some patients have issues with their lungs, their liver. So we don't think about this as a serious condition, but if you are the wrong person at the wrong time, it can turn into a serious condition. So I want to kind of comment on that. And the only other thing I want to say about the vaccine, circling back to that, since we're talking about vaccines, I think it's really important that we honor and respect people who still have vaccine hesitancy while also honoring the fact that we want to promote vaccines, because people have a lot of reasons for their hesitancy. So in a clinical world where I live, I want to be respectful, understand why they have those beliefs, maybe try to frame it a little different, but never, ever will I look at a person who doesn't want the vaccine in a negative way. However, I do want to mention that there are a lot of myths about the vaccine that led to all of these fears. And one of them was that we made the vaccine so fast, but many people didn't know that we had 10 years of messenger RNA research that occurred before the vaccine was actually created. And also a lot of the steps that were required to make the vaccine, we could bypass some of those steps because that message, we were able to bypass the steps that are normally taken by vaccines in general. So I just think the more you learn, the more you'll be receptive to it. I personally get vaccinated because I feel that I would prefer to face the vaccine's risk than the risk of the infection. That's just my personal decision. I honor everybody's decision, but those are the thoughts that kind of come to mind on these topics of vaccines and shingles.
Well, Nellie Purnell King has a question, and she says, if you had shingles, sorry, I'm gonna make sure I got this right. Can you still take the vaccine?
Yes, absolutely. I still encourage patients to get vaccinated. You will, just like with COVID, you do acquire some immunity once you've had the illness, but then the immunity is much stronger if after you've recovered from the vaccine and then you get the vaccine, illness, you can still get the vaccine later. So, in fact, what I find interesting enough is people who've had it they're more receptive to getting the vaccine after they've had it because they've had this experience and they don't want to have it again. So it's absolutely true. You can get the vaccine having had COVID, and you can get the vaccine having had shingles. Those two separate vaccines can be done after those conditions have been exposed to.
Well, this is a great conversation. Dr. Maya, did you have something you wanted to add to that conversation?
I think she slipped away. We may have to, yeah, she slipped away for a moment.
No,
yeah.
she didn't die on us. She just stepped out. I don't want to make anything. I want to tell Tamika, that's my niece. Hi, niece Tamika, and we've got other folks that are lining up. Let's go to this question. I think that's about shingles and herpes zoster infections are also very and very painful, and they're caused by different virus. Is there any cross protection by getting those vaccines against those particular maladies? Hello?
You would think so. Although they're considered separate entities, and I would say the answer is you're probably going to get some protection, but I would definitely not rely on that. I wouldn't quote me on that, but that's my understanding is that you would want to really think of them separately, although there'd probably be some cross protection.
Doug,
can I just?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Maya.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Maya.
So I apologize. I'm not going to put it on mute. I apologize. I try to because some of you get feedback if I put it, if I don't put it on mute. But after I put it on mute, I can't get it off. So so I apologize for that. All right.
We don't hear the background right now, by the way, so you're good.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, did you want to add? I don't know if you could hear what was going on while you were muted.
I could hear, but I just couldn't come off that mute. So I just want to echo what the panelists said. Right now, the COVID vaccine, you should consider talking to your doctor after you're 6 months of age. The flu is 6 months and up, and then that you all already talk about RSV or not?
No,
We did.
Okay. And then RSV is recommended for 60 years of age and older. So 6, and 60. That's the way I've been able to kind of keep it in my head. Of course, other things come into play, like Dr. Graham was saying, the status of your immune system, other things. I know they're working for RSV on making that vaccine available to people that are pregnant, and then they have for RSV monoclonal antibodies for our little babies should they come into contact. So 60 is how I've been able to keep it in my head, and so I just want to echo what all the panelists said. I think that underscores it.
Well, we've got a number of people who are chiming in, and we want to say again hello to them. We really appreciate all of you who have tuned in, and we always encourage you. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to them. Sometimes I know we get a little carried away in our conversation; we don't get back, but we'll make sure you get them. Make sure we get it done this evening. And so there are a number of other people. I don't see another question at this particular point in time. So don't hold back. Don't hold back. If you have a question, now is the time to get an answer to it. Now, who is most likely to have a bad outcome from, let's say, one of these, with you read a lot about what happened with people with COVID, but is COVID likely to be as a big a problem as it was before, or have the vaccines really created an environment where that's not going to be possible? Anybody?
This is a very, very complicated issue because the vaccine doesn't stay the same. Its job is to change and survive. So every time that we have actually devised a way to slow it down and stop it, it's found a workaround. We've been very fortunate that the latest strains are not as violently aggressive as the earlier strains, but we can't promise that that's how it's going to change in the future. So for myself, I like to recommend that people protect themselves rather than wait to see what happens, because when it happens, it may be too late to do anything about it. The other thing that I read, which disturbs me a little bit, is that some of the medications that are used to treat COVID infections may actually be selecting for the more aggressive strains of the virus. So it's not just the virus that's going to change the vaccination environment, but they're also going to change the medication environment as well. So there's lots of unpredictability for myself in this particular space.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify things that from a public health standpoint, we're talking about prevention. And that's what we're looking at in terms of the vaccines. They can reduce the likelihood that you contract the disease, but it doesn't mean that that's 100% either. But you reduce your risk significantly. And even if you get the condition, the virus, or you'll be less likely to die, and you probably will not get as sick as if you didn't. So, as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I saw there was a question in there about, and somebody pointed out that they know a number of people that have had the vaccine but still got COVID. That's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming those people are still around. And that's one of the other reasons to make sure that people do, in fact, get the vaccine and make sure that they're safe as possible.
And it worked this time. Yay. Underscoring what, because I hit mute so fast. I was like, oh no. But underscoring what Mr. Harrington said, I always tell people, the flu shot, COVID shot, tetanus shot, pick one. It doesn't make you not get it. It prepares your body to fight it off better should you have it. I remember when we were talking about COVID and we were talking about kind of growing up, people come around. And the first time, you know how they say, fool, what do they say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So it comes around, that virus, that flu, that COVID, it comes around once. Your body's army, your body's immune system is going to look at it and say, okay, you did your thing this time, but next time you come around my block, it's on site, right? And so that can be two ways. You can get COVID, which we know if I get COVID and I experience COVID again, though my body's soldiers aren't as strong as if I would have gotten that vaccine and then got COVID, right? So you can get it, right? Or you can get the vaccine. When you get the vaccine, it's like a little peekaboo. When this come around, boom, get it on site, right? And so you get COVID, you get the flu, you get the COVID vaccine, the flu shot, tetanus, Hep B vaccine, things like that. Your body's primed. It's waiting around the corner, peekaboo. And then when that virus or that thing hits your body, it's like peekaboo. I see you deal with it really fast, so you don't get the severe outcome you would have gotten had your body not already been prepared. So I think underscoring what Mr. Harrington was saying, vaccines don't mean you don't get it. Vaccines mean your body is prepared. It handled it. It had the pre-test. It read the reviews, and now it's ready for action.
And it's not just you that you're protecting. You want to be thinking about your family. I remember, particularly when my kids were younger, and sometimes even now, if one person gets sick in the family, everybody gets sick in the family. So what you're doing is your degree of severity of COVID, and everybody's kind of seen that, is much less in people in general. Now, there's always exceptions. There's always people who never got vaccinated that do just fine. But your severity of infection will likely be much less, which means you're less likely to then pass it on to one of your loved ones. And then you want to, and then think about those loved ones. I visit my father-in-law in the nursing home often. Probably be seeing him on Wednesday. And imagine me going into the nursing home and then exposing this high-risk group to COVID because I didn't take the time to do my due diligence and be responsible. And when you think about high-risk groups, you think about people over the age of 65 or 70 or so. But you can have a 65-year-old that's super healthy because they do all the things we talk about. They get enough rest, they keep their stress down, they're eating well, they're exercising. So you can be a 65 and up, which I'll be entering in 10 years, even and not necessarily be high risk, even though your number would suggest that. There are many people in communities of color because of all those social determinants of health we talk about, lack of access to care. Maybe they don't have the resources to pay the copay for medicine. Maybe they don't have the resources in their mind anyway to get the kind of food they need, or maybe the local stores don't have fresh food. So those types of folk may be at higher risk. People, your immune system, I used to deliver babies a ton, and the immune system of the mom will kind of slow down just a little bit when you're pregnant to protect the baby. So we want to attack the baby. So pregnant moms are really high risk and are people who actually should be getting vaccinated. If you think about the number of people who are on chronic medicines, and I've shared before in the past that most of the medicine consumptions in the world is consumed in the good old US of A. But if you have a bag of medicine, it's highly probable that you're at high risk for, the negative outcomes of things like COVID. So those people should take more. I mean, they should be vaccinated more often. So I just think that when you're making decisions about what you should and shouldn't do. I just had a conversation with a patient today, and it was a conversation around making lifestyle changes. But the same patient had an issue with their swollen legs. They had something called lymphedema, and they have to get their legs wrapped. But because of that swelling in their legs, they have a risk for infection. And we talked about the other medical conditions they were suffering from, congestive heart failure. And what I explained to them is that we can give you pills for congestive heart failure. We can treat the lymphedema. We can treat your diabetes. We got pills. We got lotions and potions. We got all kinds of things we can do for you. But can we now then pause for a minute and ask ourselves, well, why do you have these conditions? In this particular patient's case, it had a lot to do with the fact that they were so far from their ideal body weight that it put a lot of stress on their heart. And imagine a heart that is the size of your fist for everybody, right? But imagine that fist-sized heart having to not carry a body that's 150 or 200, but maybe that's 400. So that heart's going to swell up, eventually get stronger initially, and then it's going to, those muscles are being stretched, and eventually they get floppy and they can't pump that blood. Now imagine in that same scenario, you get to a point where you're able to impact that heart because you've actually made some lifestyle changes, and maybe that 400 goes to 300. Your heart will then be able to take a sigh of relief, a breath of relief. And then in many cases, I've seen very horrible looking congestive heart failure with an ejection fraction, how much blood they're pumping out, as low as 35%, go all the way up to 50%, go all the way up to 55. In other words, go back into the normal range. So there's no medicine that'll make that happen. So what we try to tell patients is, if we just pause for a minute, make some simple lifestyle changes, and then we surround them with resources so they can actually make these things happen, they can actually heal. And that's really what we're all about. We're trying to prevent disease. That's why we talk about vaccines. We're also trying to sneak in a conversation about lifestyle. And we want to be adherent to our medicine until we heal. And for some people, they do so well that they can actually start to wean off medicine. So I really want to encourage everybody who checks us out to don't think this is some type of imaginary thing. It only happens to people down the street. This could be your destiny. This could be the destiny of your family. And yes, you can heal, and the people around you can heal. Just do the experiment. Give it a shot. You have nothing to lose to do it. But man, you got so much more to gain.
Got a question. This came in. I want to just put out for people to respond to. Connie Taylor asked the questions. If you if you had first round of shingles, is it necessary to take the shot? And can you have too much shingles, too much shingles? I'm not sure what she means by that, but go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll chime in terms of yeah, I know you're kind of muting and unmuting. Well, the answer is, first of all, the vaccine is telling your body to ramp up something that it can identify as an enemy to the body. So when you give it additional exposures to that message, that signal, that here, FYI, it's not likely that you'll get too much information that'll then lead to harm. It's very unlikely that that's a scenario. It's not like don't think of it as like a drug that you can overdose on. It's not like that. This is simply a message to your immune system. I need you to make antibodies to this particular exposure. And a lot of times, just like with the mRNA virus, once the message is delivered, it kind of goes away. So it's really just delivering a message. And although other vaccines work slightly differently, they're able to, do a similar job. So I wouldn't worry about too much exposure. They do come up with different vaccines. And as they come up with new vaccines, they feel that those newer versions are new and improved and may offer better protection. So in most cases, when they do that, they really do recommend that you get the new and improved version. Just like with pneumonia, we have a pneumonia 20, and that version maybe provides the type of protection that's more up to date. Just like with the COVID booster, we're looking at what's out there, what versions of the virus are likely to harm you, and what they do is they adjust and course correct. So in general, that's kind of how I view it. But you will not harm yourself by giving yourself extra. If you made a mistake and got an extra shot, it probably won't harm you at all.
Yeah, I wanted
just to put the question out for Doug Joy, and I'll come right back to you. But Doug, you can think about this. People with rheumatoid issues or with those kinds of issues, are they at any increased risk? And someone wanted to know whether or not is there any problem with them taking the shot or any of these other things that we've been talking about? And Joe, I'll come right back to you as soon as Doug answers.
So Dr. Mason, that's a great question. And the answer is because their immune system doesn't work very well, they may be at higher risk for shingles. And the other problem we have is many of the medications that we use to control their arthritis may increase that risk. So the American College of Rheumatology has been very helpful in terms of developing guidelines as to how to adjust and change the medications so patients can get vaccinated. But I can say from top to bottom, the college recommends all the vaccinations, the pneumonia vaccinations, the shingles vaccinations, the flu vaccine, and the COVID vaccine if you have these conditions, because you're likely to be more ill from them than if you didn't have your disease.
And can you just give people an idea what some of those kinds of diseases are for those who don't understand?
Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Sjogren's, sarcoidosis, scleroderma, any of those diseases, the inflammatory muscle diseases, dermatomyositis, all of them can increase your risk for developing shingles, and many of them require the medications that may depress your immune system, which may increase your chance of getting shingles. So those vaccines are very highly recommended under those circumstances.
All right, Dr. Green, I saw you sort of motioning that you wanted to say something. Go right ahead.
If you see me doing this, it's because I'm frustrated with my mute button tonight. It is testing me. I just want to underscore what Dr. Hampton was saying and mention that the shingles vaccine has 2 doses. So if the question was, do you need the second shot? Yes. If the question was, I had this shingles vaccine before I had this series and I'm over 50, and I got it already, then exactly what Dr. Hampton said, and incorporating, remember, it's 2 shots. You get one. If I got one today, then I go back in 2 months or anywhere from 2 to 6 months to my primary care or place, and I get the second shot. It's a complete dose is a complete vaccination series for shingles is 2 shots. I also want to thank the panel for letting me squeeze in all the answers. I was going to say when my mute button wasn't working. There was a question about these fall respiratory diseases and how old people are getting or who is getting them. Long story short, there is a hill when you first are born, your immunity builds up, and then teenage to, let's say, 50, you're less likely we're not saying you're not getting it, you're less likely to get it, and then that hill goes up. We call that a bimodal, 2 modes, 2 points, here, down, and then back up again. And I'll explain. When you look at who is getting the flu specifically, and who's getting the flu, you will see our babies get it. When you look at who has more severe complications, so baby gets it, baby goes to the hospital, most likely baby's gonna be okay. Our elder gets it, our elder goes to the hospital. A lot of times the elder has a more severe outcome. This is also true for what we saw with COVID. And COVID added on diabetes, high blood pressure, all those things that put our bodies at an inflammatory state lack of access to food. I always point that out. Lack of access to food was on that risk chart for who's going to have a poor outcome for COVID. And then I want to say shingles. When you look at shingles, it's going to tell you that our elders are the people who have the poor outcomes. But remember, this is reactivation of chickenpox. It's because they asked the question, who gets the shingles? And they're saying elders, but that's the same virus of who had the chickenpox earlier, and that's our baby. So when you think about who's getting it, who's at risk, it's our bimodal people when we first enter into life, and then as we mature on.
Mr. Harrington, you had a question?
Not a question. I just want to provide some context and take us back, because if people remember that early on in the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about herd immunity. People forgotten that we missed the opportunity for herd immunity. Had we gotten a significant number of people vaccinated, that was the goal, and that's why there was this real push to get to what they call herd immunity, because then it would be less likely that COVID could replicate, and then it would be more likely that we wouldn't be having some of this conversation about COVID. That was the goal, but we didn't attain that goal. So we have gone from a pandemic to something that's endemic, like the flu, and it's sort of seasonal. And we know there are going to be upticks, just like with the flu. There are going to be upticks in COVID, and we do have a vaccine. And just reinforcing the message, one, that the vaccine will protect you, may not prevent you from getting COVID, but it will limit or reduce the risk that you will get COVID. But Dr. Hampton made a very important point. It also means that it reduces the risk for everyone around you and those people that you love and you care about. Because if you don't get it, you can't give it to somebody else. That's what people don't think about sometimes. It's not just getting a vaccine to protect yourself, which is important, but getting that vaccine protects everyone around you.
The other piece is that we know that these diseases do worse in people with underlying conditions, obesity, diabetes, things of that nature. So, what should we be telling people? And there's lots of them with these problems. What is that the advice that we should be telling people with these problems, as it particularly as it relates to things that we've been talking about tonight and their relative increased risk by having these underlying conditions that may or may not be appropriately managed? I'll leave that open to anyone who wants to.
Well, I'll chime in. You know, when I came up with this whole protecting your nest, theme, it's an acronym, and it talks about what you need to be thinking about to optimize your health. So what I would tell a person, just like the patient I spoke of with the lymphedema and the heart failure, what can you do to optimize your health so that if you get exposed to any type of harmful organism, you can fight it. And the key is, it's very simple. The first thing is you don't want to be deficient in nutrients. So, and one of the best ways not to be deficient in nutrients is to simply eat real food, right? So if you eat, whether you're plant-based or animal-based, eat real food. Make sure that food is not, I prefer it's not in a box. I prefer it's on the outer part of the grocery store where the fresh food lives. If you eat that way, you'll probably do really well. I know one of the questions in the chat was from Rose Crawford talking about the pneumonia vaccine, and is it, getting them at the same time? You can definitely get the pneumonia and flu vaccine at the same time. Is there a way to boost your immune system? Of course there are. CMOS. So CMOS, as she mentioned, is a way to boost your immune system. But you'll boost it even more if you just eat well. Now, having said that, I hear about CMOS so much, I had to learn about it. I know it's good for your digestion. It's good for your immune system. It's good for making you feel full. you know, and it's also good for it's sea moss, so you got iodine. It's rich in iodine, so it absolutely is healthy for you, but it is never going to replace a rich diet. So start with, so if you're a person with disease or without disease, let's eat right. It's okay to supplement if you choose to. Let's think about how we can reduce stress. Let's make sure we prioritize sleep. It sounds simple, but how many times have you gotten poor sleep and then end up sick shortly after? It happens all the time. So let's prioritize sleep and make sure we do that. Let's not put toxic thing in our body. That's why you want to eat real food, because all the stuff they put in those boxes, you can't read half of the labels because you can't pronounce it. Those types of things can cause harm. So for me, it's about creating an environment where the totality of your life, even your relationships, are going to nurture you. And if you think about the blue zones, because I made a video about that recently, they are tribal in the blue zones. They live around people who add value to their lives. And if you hang around people that do negative things, eventually that's going to rub off on you. They're very spiritual for those who are spiritual, and they put their family first. Like, we can sit here and talk about diet, but they have a community that supports them. And you don't have to get that from your family. If you have a family that's dysfunctional and they're not ready to support you, you can find a friend down the street, or you can find a support group, maybe that's dealing with your particular health concern. I just had a patient today who was looking for a diabetes support group, and she was adamant about having that because she recognized that without that support, she's going to struggle. So, and we need to live in a world where even the health systems are able to point people towards support instead of just saying, take this pill. They should say, take this pill if they need the pill, but they also should help. You know, here's the lifestyle stuff I want you to do. And by the way, we got to support, we got coaches that's going to help you, because you're going to struggle because you've been doing the same thing for the last 60 years. And in order for you to stop doing that and have new habits, you need somebody to coach you and mentor you and support you through your journey. So I think that's what I would tell somebody who has a chronic condition. You don't have to have, I believe that most chronic conditions are not chronic conditions. I know we had a little controversy when I used the term reverse in one of the previous episodes of the show, but I honestly believe you can put hypertension, let's use a better term, you can put it into remission. You can put diabetes into remission. You can put most of these chronic conditions into remission if we simply give people a path. The key is that we have to recognize it's hard, and they need somebody to hold their hand as they walk to this better physical state. And if we do that and stop blaming people because they struggle, then we'll be in a better place, in a better country, and a better health system.
Yeah, I just want to pick up, and this will be very brief, on what Dr. Tony said about pills. That's where money is made, and making sure that people are taking medicine. So our healthcare system, in terms of finances, make money off things like pills, new medicines for conditions that we know can be prevented. So you would help yourself, help the country, reduce our costs by doing some of the things that are being suggested this evening. Because one of the things that really is scary to me is the amount of drugs that are advertised directly to people on television. So you get the idea, if I have a problem, there's a pill for that. Yeah. I can take the pill. I don't have to worry about some of the things that we're talking about tonight, because I can take the pill. The pill will not change anything. It may help you manage the condition, but it's not going to improve the condition. The things we're talking about will help you improve those conditions and make it less likely that you have to take those medicines. Yeah. And in the long term, reduce the cost of healthcare in this country.
Nellie Purnell King puts out, can you still take the vaccine if you had shingles in the last few months?
So it came right off mute. Hey, my misery has become my ministry. Come on, mute button. So right now, the CDC, specifically for shingles, says there's no written delay in the time you would take it. I know for my patients, you still have to follow up with your primary care physician and kind of look at that. But the recommendation or the guidance from the CDC is there's no kind of 90-day, 30-day kind of lapse from the time you can take it. I'd like to, Dr. Mason, also grab Nellie King's next question, if that's okay.
Go right
Can
ahead.
a senior contract shingles from being around children who attend daycare? So the virus that causes shingles, absolutely. Now, I used to be a teacher, and in my head, I still kind of move on that same thing. Let's remember how shingles starts, right? You get the chickenpox or the chickenpox virus, right? It goes to sleep in your nerves, right? The things that I feel this, it just travels in the nerves, goes to sleep, right? And then irritation, stress, other illnesses, anything that causes kind of my body to be an imbalance, there's a chance that it'll boop, pop back out, right? And so shingles to shingles, I've not seen. I've seen somebody contract the virus, and then the virus goes to sleep, and I'm like, oh, I don't have any of that, and it goes to sleep, and then I go under stress. Years later, 50 years later, 70 years later, and it pops back out like, hello, here I am. And that's how shingles happen. So yes, you can absolutely get the virus that causes the shingles from anybody, not just that toddler, from anybody.
I want to thank people that are continuing to send us notes, thanking us for the information, really really in tune with what we're talking about. And I just want to encourage them to continue to do so, because it's really, really important that we get this sort of feedback, because it lets us know that you're listening, and it lets us know what questions you may have.
That's right.
And that way we can target what we talk about specifically to what you want to know. So thank you, and continue doing it. If you have more, we still got a little time left in the show. So
Let me say something, Doc, that came to my mind, because that medicine question, it touches my heart. And I want to be clear to everybody, and I don't want to be inflammatory with my comments. My wife's a pharmacist, so I'm kind of okay with medicine. That's how we feed our family. I mean, we got to have some medicine so she'll have a job, right? Now, having said that, I would just give one example of why we're backwards in terms of how we think of it. I'm a big fan of medicines because I consider it bridge therapy until you heal and you're able, with support, to adopt lifestyle changes. But if I were to use one example, that's a very popular medicine now, which is Jardiance. When Jardiance came onto the scene, it's a SGLT inhibitor. It's a drug that essentially, for all practical purposes, helps your body to remove blood sugar by basically urinating it out, right? So it's a drug that says, okay, if you take that, you'll urinate out sugar. Therefore, it'll help you with your diabetes. It's also popular because it doesn't raise insulin. Too much insulin can then lead to what we call metabolic syndrome, which is a high risk for a lot of so-called chronic medical conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol, etc. So here's the problem, guys. If you have a medicine that will allow you to pee out the sugar, what I find is that people say, well, I guess I can still eat the sugar. So here's the conundrum, right? So now, would it be logical to, if you just use a GoodRx search, and going back to what Dr. Mason said about resources, right? If you do a GoodRx search and just search Jardiance, the cost of that medicine is somewhere between $500 and $600 a month, right? Now, even if your insurance pays for it, the insurance is not really paying for it. Just like Amazon. Amazon may give you Prime at a good price, but ultimately the vendors are paying for us to be able to get that good price and free delivery. But ultimately, we're all paying because the vendors then have to raise their price, which is why there's a lawsuit against Amazon as we speak, which just came out. So my whole point is this. Let's be logical. If we teach our community how to not spend $500-$600 a month, which you should, don't take yourself off Jardiance from this conversation. What I'm saying is, wouldn't it make more sense Because if you search Jardius and you say hemoglobin A1C reduction, it's 0.7 to 0.8. So in other words, your A1C, which was 9, goes to 8.2. Now you got to ask yourself, is that worth a $500 or $600 investment when you could have simply avoided the foods that led to the sugar spike in the first place? So I just want us to pause for a minute and ask ourselves, would it not make more sense for the United States of America to spend resources on helping patients adopt lifestyle changes with coaching and support instead of giving them medications that are expensive and potentially will give you side effects? Of course, if you're peeing out a lot of glucose or sugar, your risk for a urine infection is going to be higher. So I'm just trying to reframe the discussion, reframe how we think about this, and don't give up on. See, people think you won't make that change. They think that you will not make that change. But I've seen anecdote after anecdote of patients who make these changes and they do just fine. But we don't live in a world where we think people are going to do that. And I absolutely disagree. So if you're one of those people who have a bag of medicine and you are lost and looking for hope, there is hope, but it's not going to be in the bag of medicine, which you should take until you get healthy. It's going to be in you learning how to eat to heal, because that's going to be the secret for you.
Well, Dr. Mason, as always, this is such a great, robust conversation. You know, Virginia says, evening to everyone. And Renee says, hot dog, I've made it on time. Hello to everyone. So I love the comments when they sit the comments there and they want us to know that they are here and they're watching. Pastor Crystal Bennett Kyles, that is, says to the congressman, she says, thank you for averting the shutdown. She is so excited over that. So thank you, Crystal. And I know the congressman thanks you for your warm words. And of course, our group over at Loretta Hospital, Trish is here. And she says good evening. And it's good evening from Loretta Hospital just as well. Our people over at the Core Center, they sent a message and a question because you know they are working. But they wanted Dr. Maya to quickly, because we do have just a few moments left, to quickly explain the importance of knowing about RSV.
Okay, I will. Core Center, I just want to say shout out to the Core, a great place. I'm a product of the Core Center, meaning I was taught, born, bred there. So thank you, Core Center. Well, RSV. Respiratory syncytial virus. It is a very common virus that, can you all hear me? No?
Yes.
Oh, it's a very common virus that we see impact our young people, our babies, and then we see outcomes in our elders. And that's a virus that if you take a breath in with me, everywhere you felt that breath go, from the nose all the way to the little bitty airways in your chest, it will impact everything there. The reason why it's called syncytial is because syncytium are things that come together, that kind of synchronize. So the cells in your respiratory tract that are impacted by this virus grow, and then they're saying it then looks like or comes a little globulate. The advantage of your respiratory tract is because these cells without infection are the reason it's built like it is, it's so linear, even though it's in a bulb, it's one cell and then one cell and then one cell. Well, if it forms this little ball, there's not enough space for oxygen and other stuff to hit your airways and exchange so your body gets the oxygen you need. Okay, so RSV. So that's what RSV is. Did that answer the question, Nikki, or what was the second question?
No, that question. He just wanted you to explain about RSV, and making sure that our community was aware that this is a virus out here and that it is going around. So thank you so much for sharing that about
thank you,
RSV.
Nikki. It's a virus out here and it's going around.
Yeah. Okay. So Charles McDade Sr. says, good evening to the congressman and to all the doctors. Well, Melvin Underwood shared who his, that term, baby daddy. So he shared a lot of things. Now, Melvin, we don't know who you want to call you, but in the comments, if you can just let us know who are you asking to call you since you left your number, we'll make sure we get on top of that. Melvin Sykes is here. Oh my God, Dr. Mason, Tamika is here and she invited all her friends. I know you talked about your niece a little earlier. But she wanted me to make sure that we told, she said, hello, Uncle Terry. So Uncle Terry, you spoke about it. He also thanks everyone for everything that they do. Totally 1009 talked about low carbs and blood pressures and things. Tamika, as she always does, and I love her so much, she invites all of her friends to come on and watch. I want to say hey to April. I want to say hey to Gail Washington, that is. Hey, Dee Dee Moore. I want to say hey to all of them. Audrey Daycock says good evening to the congressman and to everyone. Joe even chimed in and started answering some of those questions in the chat because we were getting so many questions. So he began to answer some of them in the chat. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. Well, Stephen Brown says, thank you. I think they're saying thank you. Thank you again for this most important, informative health session. She talks about just how important these sessions are we have, and she also revealed who her doctor is. So thank you so very much for sharing. Getting involved to make a difference is awesome conversation. Dr. Maya will post a number of those questions in the chat, because the chat got so, you guys got so robust that conversation they had to answer. Harvey Howard says very interesting. Need much more of this, and very, very powerful and informative. Thank you so much, Howard, for being here with us. VJB says thank you to the doctors. Can't thank you enough for caring and taking the time to share this information with us, and being so happy that we are here. Nurse Kim is here with us, and her and they are talking forth and saying thank you so very much to each other, and they're talking about those chicken pox. Well, none of us want those chicken pox. Shackleford also invited some people to be just as well. She asked some questions about systems and some things, and
You're breaking up.
everybody. But guess what? I know you guys hate to hear us say this, but it is our time. Dr. Mason, you did a fantastic job. So why don't you take everybody around the board and tell them they're until next Mondays.
Well, you guys know the routine. Let's, in the words of the late, great Marvin Gaye, let's get it on. Okay, Joe, you want to start? Till next Monday? Joe?
I have to take myself off mute. Yeah, I was looking for a quote that would probably capture the essence of what we've been talking about, and I found one. Health is like money. We never have a true idea of its value until we lose it.
Yeah.
Let's go. Doug?
I just want to say how much I respect and admire the way Dr. Tony handles his patients who are uncertain about vaccines, and I wish I could do more to help him. I just read today that they think that the COVID vaccine saved 3 million lives. I just reflect what Dr. Harrington said. It's not just your life, but the lives of the people around you. So I just want to help people think about that and thinking you're not doing this just for yourself, but you're doing it for your entire community.
Okay. Dr. Maya?
Well, recently, so I just want to share, two things right quick. All right, Dr. Tony, talking about get some real food. Hopefully next week, I want to hear you and Dr. Mason tell us again what real food is, right? The other thing I want to say is I want to share with the community something that's been on my heart. What came to my mind is, at a point in this life, find the greatest version of yourself and then get lost in it. Until next Monday.
Okay.
That's nice.
Yep. Who did we miss?
Myself, maybe. Yeah. So
I think
always a gift to have a platform to be in front of people. I remember the first time I was in clinic, and I wasn't a resident anymore. I was an attending, meaning I didn't have anybody to talk to but myself. And it was such a humbling moment when I realized that my words, my advice would, really impact somebody's life. And I had a very good young patient I had to talk to this past week about cancer, and it broke both of our hearts because literally we're a couple of years apart in age. But the real gift is that you feel comfortable having that conversation, and you feel like, man, if he's going to have that conversation with anybody, I'm happy that I'm privileged to be that person. So I just wanted to start there, and I also want to just go back to RSV, and they it almost feels like we're finding ways for the drug companies to make money, but that's not really what's happening. All of a sudden RSV is a thing, right? Well, the reality is, if you just search RSV, I would guarantee you that the number of people who die every year from RSV is not 1,000 or 2 or 3. It's probably close to 10,000, just like with the flu and pneumonia and COVID. So when you start thinking about those kind of numbers, always remember, these are not numbers, these are people. These are human lives, many of whom may still be here if they had only been given an opportunity or having access to a vaccine. So that's why we push this. We're data people. I know Dr. Maya in particular is a data person. We look at numbers, and if I could take a 10,000 RSV number down to 5,000 or 3,000, and all of those thousands of people can still be here with their family, then I would have done my job. I would have lived my purpose, and I would have added to humanity. So that's why we do this. But we also honor those who don't want to do that. We just want to make sure those who do have an opportunity. So as you think about these things, I encourage you to lean towards using them, but always know that you'll have a friend in all of us if you choose not to.
Doug, did I miss you? Doug?
Dr. Mason, I did get a chance to say something. Thank you.
All right. I think we got everybody. We miss anybody? Okay. Well, we want to thank everybody for being here. We want to thank the congressman. And right now, I'm going to turn it back over to Nikki and the congressman. And we'll be here we'll be right here next week, same time, same station.
Well, Congressman, take us home.
The until next Mondays are so profound. Trying to evaluate or trying to determine the effectiveness of prevention. And I keep thinking that we're getting more and more into the prevention stage, and understand that if you can help change the status of one individual, and then that individual becomes 2 individuals, 3 individuals, 30, 300. We often talk about health status of population groups, and we study that in significant ways. I think the value of the information that is provided is that if people can take information, internalize it, use it, and not necessarily feel like they're being beat over the head with it. I always think that the best education and the most effective education, when it's done in a light way, where it's not necessarily pressed in, it's presented in a way that individuals can take it, make use of it, and keep going, feeling they're going to come back another day to make even greater use of it. I think that really becomes the true value. So let me thank all of you again. New ideas, concepts, and ideologies are emerging all the time. And healthcare is on the cutting edge of the new world that we're talking about creating. So thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Until next Monday, be good to yourself and better to even somebody else. Have a good one.
Take care, guys.
Yeah.